The night was heavy. It pressed down on the village like a thick blanket, trapping the heat of the day in the packed earth, clinging to the walls of mud and straw. No wind stirred. The air was still, so still that every creak of timber, every soft shuffle of a sleeper on their mat, carried further than it should have. Even the insects, relentless in their chorus, had quieted. It was a silence that unsettled. Then it came. A hyena's cry, jagged and piercing, split the night open. It wasn't the fractured laughter the villagers knew, that cruel chorus of many throats rising together. This was solitary. A single sharp screech, high-pitched and broken, like metal tearing. It carried across the open square, over roofs thatched with grass, across the fields beyond. Dogs lifted their heads, ears pricked, growls rumbling low in their throats. Chickens stirred uneasily in their coops. Children, startled from dreams, turned over restlessly, pressing closer to their mothers. The sound did not fade quickly. It clung to the walls, to the air, to the very soil. It seemed to echo from beneath the ground as much as from the distant hills. Elders stirred on their mats, their eyes clouded with years, opened wide. Some whispered quietly to themselves, old words, half prayer, half memory. For they remembered stories where animals were messengers, where a single cry in the night was not just noise but warning. The village did not speak aloud. No one dared. But the cry had entered them all the same, a thin blade of unease, drawn across every heart. Somewhere in the dark, unseen, the hyena's voice fractured again, and the earth seemed to listen. The hyena's cry faded into distance, but the village did not relax. The silence afterward was heavier, stretched taut like a rope that might snap. Children whimpered in their sleep, their small hands curling against their mother's arms. Dogs prowled the edges of the square, heads low, their teeth bared, though nothing moved in the darkness. The ground felt different. It had always been solid, hard-packed earth beaten firm by countless footsteps, by dancing, by harvest songs, by the weight of the village itself. But tonight, something about it had changed. It seemed softer in places, warmer under bare soles, as though something beneath had been disturbed. An elder stirred from his mat, sitting upright, his joints creaking like dry branches. His eyes searched the moonlit square, though nothing moved but dust. He pressed his palm to the ground beside him. The soil held a strange pulse. Not a tremor, not yet, but a faint sense of breath. He withdrew his hand quickly, muttering to himself. Others noticed, too. A woman fetching water paused, her jug balanced on her hip. She bent slightly, narrowing her eyes at a crack that had not been there the day before, running along the corner of her hut. Thin, harmless looking. But she marked it with her gaze, then stepped back. The air was too still, the silence too deep. The hyena's screech still echoed in their minds, repeating itself long after the sound was gone. Some believed the animal had cried at the moon, others that it had seen something hidden. A few whispered that it had not called for its own kind, but for the earth itself. The villagers said nothing aloud. They turned inward, clutching their children, tending to fires that burned low. They waited for morning or for the silence to break, whichever came first. But beneath them, the tunnels that no one remembered still listened, and the soil, shifting grain by grain, was preparing to answer. Beneath the square, beneath the huts, beneath the roots of the acacia tree that marked the village center, the earth was hollow. Not all of it, only a network of forgotten tunnels, cut by hands that no one alive remembered. Long ago, in seasons of hunger and fear, men had dug them for storage, for safety, for escape. Narrow passageways carved into clay and stone, shored up with wood cut from the forest, marked with smoke from old torches. Time had buried them. The mouths of the tunnels had been sealed, their stories folded into silence. Generations passed. Children grew into elders, never knowing they walked above empty veins of earth. The soil held their weight, their huts, their fires, their lives. And for a long time, it was enough. But nothing buried stays buried forever. Wood rots, beams splinter, clay dries and cracks, stones shift, rain seeps into places where it should not. And every season, the weight of life above pressed harder, settling the ground grain by grain, year by year. Now, in the quiet after the hyena's cry, the tunnels stirred. They did not move with violence, not yet. But deep below, timbers groaned. Earth pressed inward against the walls, soft at first, then firmer. A hollow place strained to hold against time. Dust drifted silently in the dark, shifting with the faint vibration of distant footsteps above. The village did not know. Children slept, women tended fading fires, men rolled in uneasy dreams. But under them, silence cracked in slow motion. The tunnels were breathing again, and soon they would break. The second cry came without warning. It was sharper than the first, closer, cutting through the night like metal against stone. This time it was not distant. It seemed to rise from the very edge of the village, where the thorn fence met the fields. The hyena's voice cracked the silence into jagged shards, rattling against walls, waking sleepers fully now. Dogs barked wildly, teeth bared, their voices colliding with the hyena's cry until the air was full of sound. Then came another sound, deep, heavy, inside the earth. At first it was like a log snapping under too much weight. A dry crack, sharp and sudden, but it did not stop. The noise stretched on, groaning, splintering, spreading, as though the ground itself was a great beam of timber snapping from the inside. The soil trembled, the mat beneath a child quivered, a water jug near a doorway tipped, spilling into the dust. Chickens thrashed in their cages, wings beating against bamboo. Women clutched their children tighter. Men leapt to their feet, eyes wide, looking down instead of out, because the danger was not in the dark. It was beneath. The earth gave a low sigh. A shiver rippled through the square. The acacia tree at the center shifted, roots groaning against soil that no longer wanted to hold them. Dust leaked upward through the cracks, rising in pale wisps around the roots. The ground was changing. The villagers shouted to one another now, voices colliding in fear, but words meant nothing against the sound beneath. It was louder than their cries, louder than the dogs, louder than the hyena that had vanished into silence. The village was standing on the breath of something that could no longer remain hidden, and the earth was beginning to exhale. It began with a single lurch. The ground beneath the central square sagged, just enough to tilt water bowls, just enough to send a shudder through every hut. For a heartbeat the earth held, then it dropped. The collapse came like thunder. Soil ripped downward in waves, swallowing the center of the village whole. The acacia tree groaned once, its roots twisting upward before it fell, vanishing into the pit it had shaded for generations. Huts nearest the square buckled at their foundations, walls cracking as the ground beneath them tore away. Voices erupted, shouts, screams, the shrill cries of children carried into the night. Men grabbed spears they could not use against soil. Women clutched bundles of cloth and bone, running for the edges as the square yawned wider. Dogs barked furiously at the chasm, lunging at the air as if they could bite the earth back into place. The tunnels, long hidden, gave way all at once. Roof beams splintered like matchsticks. Clay walls crumbled. Decades of forgotten storage, baskets, gourds, rusted tools, tumbled into darkness, shattered and lost. The dust was immediate, choking, blinding. It rose in a storm, filling lungs, burning eyes, turning the moonlight into a dull, suffocating haze. Through it, shapes staggered, villagers stumbling toward safety, shadows of animals fleeing, the silhouette of huts half swallowed by the earth. The pit roared as more soil slid inward. Each collapse echoed like a drumbeat, rolling through the night, shaking the ground beneath bare feet. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the motion slowed. The square was gone, replaced by a jagged wound. The acacia, the fire pits, the tree roots, the carved paths where children once played, all buried beneath. What remained was silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something that had fed. The night had broken open. Now it hung in the air, heavy with dust and silence. The square was gone. In its place yawned a raw wound, edges jagged, still crumbling as small stones tumbled into the pit with faint, hollow clinks. The villagers stood at its edge, their faces pale in the moonlight, their bodies ghost-like through the haze. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide, coughing into cloth pressed over mouths. Men gripped spears without knowing why. Their weapons, sharp and ready for beasts, were useless against soil. The acacia tree was gone. Its roots, once a map of memory, had been torn out and swallowed. The fire pit where songs had risen was buried under collapsing clay. Mats, vessels, carved stools, all the pieces of daily life, lay broken or vanished. The heart of the village had been erased in a single night. Dogs circled the edge of the pit, barking into the hollow, their voices ragged, their bodies stiff with fear. Chickens fluttered, confused, some perched high on broken poles, refusing to descend. The air was thick, metallic, full of the scent of torn earth and old rot awakened from below. Elders sat in silence, their eyes fixed not on what had fallen, but on what had been heard before it fell. The hyena's cry. They spoke softly, voices hoarse, trading stories remembered from their own elders. That animals sometimes see what people cannot, that a cry at the wrong hour is not laughter but warning. They did not say prophecy, they did not say curse, but the memory of the sound threaded through every thought, every glance into the pit. The village breathed as one, shallow and cautious. No one dared step closer. No one dared test the ground. The night smelled of memory torn open, and the silence that followed was not emptiness. It was weight, as though the earth, having spoken, was now listening for an answer. Dawn came slowly. The horizon glowed pale, then red, then gold, spilling light across the savanna. But when it touched the village, it revealed only absence. Where there had been a square, there was now a void, a gaping wound in the earth, dark and wide, its edges raw with torn soil. The pit lay still, silent. The dust had settled into a thin film over everything, on thatched roofs, on the backs of goats, on the skin of children who had slept little. The air smelled faintly of ash and clay. Even the birds were cautious, circling high above, calling only once before gliding on. The villagers gathered at the edge, quiet, their faces drawn. They saw the hole clearly now, not blurred by night or dust. They saw the roots jutting out, snapped like broken ribs. They saw the shadows within, too deep to measure. Some peered down with wide eyes. Others turned away quickly, as if afraid of being pulled in by sight alone. Nothing of the acacia remained. Its branches, its shade, its history, gone. The fire pit was gone. The mats, the bowls, the carved stools, all gone. The ground had swallowed more than soil. It had taken memory. The dogs whined, low in their throats. Children clung to their mothers. Elders murmured old words, half prayers, half laments. One man whispered what all were thinking. The hyena knew. It had cried before the earth broke, a warning or a prophecy. By midday, the sun blazed high, but the pit did not warm. It seemed to hold its own shadow, deeper than light could reach. Those who passed it would pause, stepping wide around it, their eyes drawn but unwilling to linger. The village continued, smaller now, its heart erased, and yet, in every step, in every glance, the story remained. That one night, a hyena's screech pierced the air, and the ground itself answered.